Hey guys, today I have a fun art activity that anybody can participate in, and it's a great way to not only stay safe during COVID, but spread a little cheer. Today we're going to be making watercolor ATCs for an art drop. So I'm using some mini pads of watercolor paper. These are the Stonehenge Aqua cold press pads. They're like $2 each, and you get like 10 sheets of mini watercolor paper in them, but you are welcome to use whatever materials you have around or that you enjoy. So to paint these, I'm using the Core Mini palette. I've already inked these using a Sakura Pigma brush pen, and all of the materials that I've used, if you want to paint along, will be down in the description below. And I'm using the Core Mini palette to paint these. So I'm going to use a little bit of white masking tape. I'm going to apply it to my arm just to remove a little bit of the adhesion, and then I'm going to use the chipboard back of another watercolor pad as a stable surface to hold these in place. So if you're new to ATCs, those are artist trading cards. They've waxed and waned in popularity, but I think now with COVID and, some concerns with USPS surviving being very valid concerns, now would be a wonderful way to send a little bit of original art in an envelope to somebody you care about or to a fellow artist you admire. So this is something that anybody can do, anyone at any skill level can do, because who doesn't love receiving hand-drawn, handmade art? These were made to leave in the little libraries in St. Charles Parish, Louisiana. So I've adhered them to my structural support, and now I'm just preparing my painting surface, my painting area. Gotta get in the mood, gotta get my environment all set up. I tend to always set things up the same way when I'm painting at a desk, regardless of where I am. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in a really simple background. And I did a series of these. If you guys check out my Instagram at instagram.com/natosoup, you'll see I did about 10 of these. And they're all just various illustrations of Kara, my Lilliputian main character of my comic, 7-inch Kara, or Tanner, her equally Lilliputian messenger friend, just kind of hanging out with animals or enjoying the flowers or eating tasty things, just general cute tiny people things. But as I said with ATCs, it can be anything you want, and something I think would be really awesome and fun would be an ATC trade amongst webcomic people. Speaking of, I am a webcomic person myself, and you can read all about Kara, Tanner, and Naomi, their adventures in my comic 7-inch Kara. You can check that out at 7inchkara.com. So for these, I'm just simply blocking in using a light wash of phthalo blue and a light wash of ultramarine blue using silver black velvet watercolor brushes. These are some of my favorite watercolor brushes. They combine the best aspects of, traditional natural watercolor brushes made from animal fur with synthetic brushes. They can hold a lot of water. They hold a tip really well. My cat doesn't try to eat them, and they're fairly affordable. So I really like these. Then I'm just using a little bit of ultramarine blue in Kara's eyes just to create sort of the shadow, since the whites of our eyes are often a little bit in shadow from our eyelids or, our brow ridge, casting that shadow down onto them. So it just adds a little bit more volume and depth. And these tiny things are like 1.5 inches by 2 inches, so they're really super small. For her skin tone, it's just a light mix of burnt sienna with loads of water. Burnt sienna in the Core Mini palette is a really beautiful color. It's a rich orangey brown, but it really packs a punch. So a little bit goes a long way. And that can be said with most of the colors in the Core Mini palette. I reviewed it a while back and fell in love. And it's one of those palettes that anytime I'm traveling, this thing ends up in my purse, my pocket, or my backpack. I really recommend it. But all of the colors are very saturated and they reactivate very quickly. So a little bit goes a long way. And even though mine looks like it's seen some use, you guys have no idea how much use it's seen. I use this thing all the time and I really enjoy it. So if you're on the market for an affordable watercolor palette with a limited number of colors just to kind of help you get started, this would be one of my top 3 recommendations. And one of the nice things about the burnt sienna is if you're someone who kind of struggles to mix skin tones, this burnt sienna is a great jumping off point because it can, depending on the saturation that you mix your colors, you can really get a variety of different skin tones. And it doesn't necessarily require you to remix the color a bunch of times. You just add a little bit more burnt sienna as you go in order to build up that contrast. And speaking of contrast, I'm now adding a second layer to Kara's skin to start building up said contrast. So for the blush, I use a little bit of the alizarin crimson in this set. Alizarin crimson is kind of an orangey red, but for lighter skin tones, it works really well as a blush color. For darker skin tones, I would mix the alizarin crimson with a little bit of the quinacridone magenta that's right next to it in the palette to make more of a true red or a bluer red. And one of the really nice things about Stonehenge Aqua paper, you guys have heard me talk about it on the channel. I reviewed both the hot press and the cold press, but it's a very affordable watercolor paper that performs like it's much more expensive than it is. It's fairly sturdy. It can take a lot of layers. It plays nicely with ink pens if you're like me and you like to ink your work first. And the hot press is honestly one of my maybe 3 favorite hot press watercolor papers. I really love it. Now, one of the downsides is it can be a little bit harder to find. Even places that carry Stonehenge, like the printmaking paper, might not carry Stonehenge Aqua. So if you have a favorite local joint that's locally owned, like David's in Metairie, Louisiana, you might want to request that they consider carrying it. So I've painted in her overalls using the, I think I mixed, that's a good one. I think I mixed the phthalo blue that's in this set with the Payne's gray. So this is another set that doesn't include a black, but it also doesn't include a white, which I like because it doesn't waste time with white. So you are going to have to practice color mixing. I would recommend you practice color mixing just to kind of get a handle on the set, but it really has a lot of variety. It really offers a lot of diversity, and it's a really versatile little set, and it's barely bigger than a card, so it's perfect for taking on the go. And for her dress, I just mixed some of the magenta, the Quin magenta I was just talking about, with some of the ultramarine blue. For the rose, I mixed some of the alizarin crimson with the Quin magenta, so you can see we get a softer color. It's a little more blue influenced. And then for the stem on the rose, I mixed the very bright cool influence yellow that you see in the shot with a little bit of the phthalo blue down at the bottom. Now there is a sap green and I do like it, but I love the color you get when you mix their yellow with phthalo blue. It's just gorgeous. So you guys can probably see that for me, watercolor is all about building up layers. That's how I develop my contrast, is many, many layers. And it does require some patience, but it goes faster than you'd think. I was painting these in Southeast Louisiana, and it's very, very humid there, and I really would have benefited from a dehumidifier, but they still dried relatively quickly considering. So unless it's just like actively raining as you're painting and you're just slopping water down on the paper, they are going to dry faster than you give them credit for. So on the left-hand side, in order to get that really nice kind of almost pumpkin-y yellow, I mixed our cool yellow with the Indian yellow, which is a really warm yellow that shades all the way to a nice brown. I mixed those two together to achieve that color. And then to paint the shadow on her skin, I mixed the Quin Magenta with the ultramarine blue. And I really love, so normally when you mix a blue and a red type color together to get a purple, you get some really funky kind of purples. It's never really what you want. And while I wouldn't say this is a true purple like a dioxine purple, which is also included in this set, it is a nice purple. Actually, now that I think about it, I probably didn't use ultramarine blue. I probably used dioxine purple with magenta to get this sort of red-violet color. Womp womp. My apologies. These are recorded in post after I've time-lapsed them a couple of times, and while I have a pretty good memory for the colors that I use and the order of operations, since I am a creature of habit and I tend to do things the same way over and over and over again, I do get it wrong from time to time. And then I'm just painting some phthalo blue as a glaze. So I've added some more phthalo blue to our initial phthalo blue mix, but it's not full saturation. It's not like I'm working directly from the half pan, but I'm painting that on top of our stem. And what that's going to do as it dries is it's going to look more green. So it's optically blending. Our eyes and our brain are blending the yellow and the blue together to be green. So at this point, I have most of the local color established. I have most of the local color figured out. Her hair, I'm reserving for later. I already know what color her hair is going to be. And when it comes to darker hair colors, I usually wait to the end for that so that they don't reactivate and then pollute the colors around them. So I usually reserve the hair for around the end. But at this point, I'm really just building up layers, building up saturation, and kind of covering the same ground over and over again. So now that I've applied the most of the contrast and most of the shadows using local color, I can start painting in the hair. And just as I used burnt sepia earlier for her skin, I'm using a much thicker mix of burnt sepia as the start for her hair. And you guys can really see how versatile the color is. You get a beautiful lighter skin tone, and you can also get darker, richer browns. In order to get even darker browns, I start mixing the burnt sienna with the burnt umber that's right next to it. And I may even go in straight with just burnt umber. And then if I want something really, really dark, like it's a sepia, I'll mix the burnt umber with the Payne's gray. That's the darkest color in the set, minus the dioxine purple. And that gives us a really dark brown. So once everything's been painted and has a chance to dry, I'm just going to go in and add some highlights with white gouache. And you can see here how they were added. I don't know why they got cut out, but I really feel like they add a lot to my illustrations. I can use them to add in highlights on the hair, the eyes, add highlights to the glass beads, or even paint in a paisley effect. And these things are so tiny. They're probably about the size of a business card, if not smaller. So here's the real reason why I painted these. I'm going to go hide them in little libraries about St. Charles Parish. And I did that during the Kara Kickstarter, partially just to celebrate the Kickstarter itself and to do something community-minded during COVID when we can't exactly go out and do a lot of fun things. I thought people might be able to find these and it could be like a fun little adventure. And I have a vlog here on the channel. I'll link it in the cards and I'll link it in the description where I'm actually going out and hiding these. And I shared the vlog so that people could go out and find them before the moisture in the area completely ruins them. So there's several little libraries in St. Charles Parish. There are various levels of quality in terms of the build as well as in terms of the books included. If you guys aren't familiar with little libraries, it can be a wonderful way to encourage literacy in your own area. This is something that is generally privately funded, although I do believe the St. Charles Public Library does help fund the erection of little libraries in the area, but you do have to donate the space for it. So after Joseph and I move, that's something that I'd really like to have in our front yard. And for these two ATCs, I put them in a little library by the church I used to go to when I was a really young girl, as well as the little library down at the Bridge Park for people to find. And I was really delighted when I got a couple of messages on Instagram from people who actually found these. So it was exciting to know that these didn't just like wither and die and absorb all of the atmospheric moisture in Louisiana, but they went home with somebody because these are original pieces of art. And it's a wonderful way, if you're an artist, to kind of get involved in a limited way in your own community and to maybe inspire a love of original art in other people. And I was so delighted when one of the people wrote in and said their kid was an artist too. So I hope you guys will give ATCs a try, and I hope you guys found this tutorial helpful, useful, and inspiring. Bye, guys!